Good afternoon from a very drizzly Cardiff Central railway station, and I've just arrived here on a slightly unusual route via West Midlands Railway and Transport for Wales from Birmingham New Street. So if you haven't watched that video, I will put a link in one of the corners, whichever it is, I'm not quite sure, for you to go back and watch that. But for today's vlog, I will be catching a GWR service down to Portsmouth Harbour. Now this is one of their regional services, and it takes much of the Wessex line from Bristol via Bath, Westbury, Salisbury, right the way down to Southampton, and of course the coast at the naval city of Portsmouth. So it should be a really enjoyable journey, just over 3 hours. There should be some nice scenery along the way. Hopefully the weather cheers up a bit later on in the afternoon. And yeah, I've got about half an hour before my 12:30 service, so let's head inside the station and we can have a look around before we jump on board. Opened by the South Wales Railway in 1850, Cardiff Central is the principal station serving Wales's capital. Since its opening, the station has undergone several major redevelopments, most notably between 1931 and 1934 under the direction of the GWR's chief architect Percy Culverhouse, who, as well as designing the beautiful Art Deco entrance building here at Cardiff, is also credited with Newton Abbot Railway Station, additional platforms and terracotta buildings at Bristol Temple Meads, and the station buildings at Leamington Spa. And having made it through the barriers and up to platform level, there's yet more history to be found, including these beautiful original railway benches from various stages of the station's past, with both the distinctive heraldry of the GWR and the British Railways Western region, which inherited much of the Great Western's network upon nationalisation in 1948. Today, Cardiff Central is the busiest station in Wales and sees various services run by multiple train companies, most notably Transport for Wales, who operate local commuter services on the valleys and Cardiff local routes across South and West Wales to destinations like Swansea, Carmarthen, Pembroke Dock and Milford Haven, and longer distance services via the Welsh Marches line, including hourly trains to Manchester and 2-hourly services to Holyhead via the North Wales coast. On top of this, Cross Country operate an hourly service to Nottingham via Gloucester, Birmingham and Derby, and finally GWR run both intercity services to the capital every half hour and regional services to Exeter, St David's and Portsmouth Harbour, the latter of which we'll of course be taking today. So having had a good look around the station, and with about 20 minutes before departure, today's GWR service pulled into platform 1, ready to take me down to the coast at Portsmouth Harbour in the form of a 3-carriage Class 166. Entering service in 1993, this fleet of 21 units, like the similar Class 165s, are known as the Networker Turbos and have become staples of the GWR regional network, operating across the west and southwest of England alongside the older fleet of Class 158s. In terms of the interior, all the units have undergone recent refurbishment, featuring a small declassified first-class section with 2+2 table seating and standard 2+3 seating throughout the rest of the train. Looking at the seats themselves, I found them to be pretty basic in comparison to other regional units across the UK, and certainly not the most comfortable for a 3-hour journey, though they did feature both standard and USB power outlets. Regarding ticketing, I paid just £21.25 down to Portsmouth, having been split at Southampton, which seems to be pretty good value considering the length of the journey.
Or text the British Transport Police on 61016.
So having powered out of Cardiff Central bang on time, now's a good time to take a quick look at the route for today. With departure from the Welsh capital in a northeasterly direction, we essentially follow the path of the South Wales Main Line up to our first station stop of Newport, through the Severn Tunnel and onwards to Filton Junction, where we peel off for the short stint through the suburbs of Bristol. With arrival at Temple Meads, we then change direction to join the 85-mile-long Wessex Main Line, tracing the winding Avon Valley through the city of Bath and as far as Trowbridge. Upon arrival at Westbury, we briefly cross paths with the Reading to Taunton line before the run down to Salisbury, intersecting the West of England line to Exeter and then to Southampton Central via Romsey. With this signalling the end of the Wessex Main Line, for the final run on to Portsea Island we briefly used the West Coastway Line, calling at Fareham, Cosham, Fratton, Portsmouth and Southsea, and finally Portsmouth Harbour, the end of the line. Total journey time to cover the 141-mile route is scheduled to be 3 hours and 21 minutes, giving us a reasonable average speed of 42 miles per hour. Cruising along the electrified South Wales Main Line at our top speed of 90 miles per hour, we soon reached the city of Newport, a key rail interchange having been rebuilt and enlarged in 2010. The overhead wires reached the station here in 2019 as part of the Great Western Main Line electrification scheme introduced way back in 2009, a programme which has since been plagued with delays and, at the present time, still hasn't reached its intended targets of Swansea and Bristol. Speaking of Bristol, having passed under the Severn estuary using the 4.3 mile long Severn Tunnel, we soon leave the electric lines at the previously mentioned Filton Junction before arriving to Filton Abbey Wood, just to the north of the city centre.
Bristol Temple Mews. This is a Great Western Railway service to Portsmouth Harbour.
A short while later, we passed Barton Hill Depot, used by River train care for the servicing of cross-country units, as well as the maintenance and overhaul of various other train sets. From here, it's not long before we reach the Grand Station at Temple Meads, where we have about 8 minutes as our 3-car Class 166 joins with another 2-car unit to form a 5-carriage train down to Portsmouth. Bristol Temple Meads was opened in 1840 as the western terminus of the GWR, the first railway designed by the legendary engineer Isambard Kingdom Brunel, and has since seen major expansion works to accommodate the rapid growth in passenger numbers, including the iconic curved station roof currently undergoing restoration work and the 1930s platform expansion by Culver House, whose work we saw earlier at Cardiff. With the change of direction at Bristol, I was now facing forwards as we traced the valley of the Bristol Avon River, which runs from the Cotswold Hills towards the Severn estuary. Following the path of the river upstream, it soon guides us into the city of Bath, home of the famous hot springs, which, alongside its extensive Roman archaeology and the remarkable Georgian architecture and town planning, has gained the city UNESCO World Heritage Site status in its entirety, the only city in the UK to be designated this prestigious title.
Great Western Railway service to Portsmouth Harbour. Head on Avon. This is a Great Western Railway service to Portsmouth Harbour.
After crossing the River Avon for the 3rd time since leaving Bristol, we soon reach Southampton Junction, where we leave the Great Western Main Line on our way towards Bradford-on-Avon, and, with some beautiful green scenery, I sat back to enjoy the section of the journey down to Westbury. Having enjoyed that very relaxing section of the journey down from Bath, my GWR service eventually reached Westbury, almost halfway into the journey. The station here is a major junction sitting on the line from Paddington down to Devon and Cornwall, the Wessex Main Line from Bristol to Southampton, and the line up to Swindon via Chippenham. As well as the multitude of GWR services, both regional and intercity, Westbury also sees a handful of southwestern trains from Yeovil to Waterloo via Frome, which, alongside the numerous freight workings to and from the expansive yards seen here, makes this an extremely busy rail scene. Departing Warminster, the tracks soon run parallel to part of the extensive military garrison located on the edge of the town, itself lying on the western corner of Salisbury Plain military training area. This 150 square mile expanse of MOD land covers roughly half of the plain and makes up 11% of Wiltshire, being used for both live firing and army exercises. Back in 1943, the isolated village of Imber was evacuated to allow training for Operation Overlord, and has remained closed ever since, except for a handful of annual events, including the famous Imber bus service, which takes passengers on both vintage and modern buses to the village from Warminster Station, something I would love to do in the future. Arriving at yet another busy rail interchange, this time Salisbury lying on the West of England line to Exeter, our train picks up a 15-minute delay as we wait for a late-running southwestern service to clear our path, though we're soon back on the go, heading towards our next stop at the town of Romsey. With the distinctive sight of shipping containers soon filling the view out the window, it becomes clear that we've reached the port of Southampton, the second largest container terminal in the UK after Felixstowe, before arrival into Central Station. It's here that the Wessex Main Line finally ends after the journey down from Bristol, and where we join the very western section of the 62-mile West Coastway Line to Brighton, though we'll of course only be going as far as the branch to Portsmouth.
Make sure the bar's down.
Making a quick succession of stops at both Fareham and Cosham, our GWR service finally makes the short crossing over Portsbridge Creek, the tidal waterway separating Portsea Island from the mainland. The island, just 9.5 square miles in area, is of course home to the city of Portsmouth, so with the last few intermediate stops being made at Fratton and Portsmouth and Southsea, the almost empty service began to wind its way down the final approach to the harbour station, concluding what had been a fascinating journey from Wales, which, in the end, took just over 3.5 hours. Though, with the seats being not the most comfortable for such a long journey, by this point I was rather grateful to be able to finally stretch my legs beside the sea. Well, I've made it to Portsmouth Harbour and the long-awaited sunshine has finally made an appearance for the first time today, and it was a really enjoyable journey with GWR. I obviously went the whole way from Cardiff to Portsmouth, but to be honest, most people were just making like individual journeys along the route. For example, Cardiff to Bristol was really busy, standing room only, and then it was quieter from then on. So really people get on and off along the route, and I think I was one of the only people doing it from end to end. And that sort of makes sense because the train that I was on, it wasn't the most comfortable for an in-city journey, bearing in mind that I was over 3.5 hours on that service, so it was quite a long one. But nonetheless, it was still a really enjoyable journey with some lovely scenery. So thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will hopefully see you for my next adventure.